you can justify your price easily with a brand that matches the value that you position yourself as.
My guest today is Aneirin Jones. He's a brand expert running his own brand agency, and he has worked with some smaller startups and bigger internationally known companies. If you're wondering what title to give yourself, or you need help on how to present yourself, then in this podcast we are talking about the importance of having a good title and the steps you need to do to get there. Aneirin Jones, welcome to the show. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly.
That's not too bad. Aneirin, it's pretty hard.
Aneirin, yeah.
Nai is the easier.
Okay. So you run your own business. You have worked with a lot of companies, smaller, bigger, like the British filming industry, Unilever Food Solutions, and recently you also made a lot of designs for the PS5 controller. And we're going to talk about all of those. But let's start with you telling us who you are, what's your title, what you do.
Okay, so my name's Aneirin Jones, or Anai for short. I'm a brand strategist and designer, and I run my own branding agency just outside of London. And I've been in the business for about 6-7 years, and that's it. That's me in a small nutshell. I suppose my focus is on businesses who are either pioneers or disruptors in their industries, though that's any type of business that's like a startup or tech that's trying to move society forward in some way, whether it's social or technological. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I love that you find the perfect way to present yourself to who you are talking to, with who you are working with. But yeah, I guess we're gonna talk more about it.
Yeah.
The first thing I'm always asking everyone in this podcast is what's your distance from your destination? Meaning, what is your goal right now and how far you think you are to get there?
Well, I think I've mentioned it to you before, that I don't settle very easily. Like I think I'd use the analogy, there's a ladder. I start at the bottom and I'm constantly climbing up every rung of the ladder. There's a different group of businesses depending on this scale or whatever. And I've worked with those businesses at that point in time, maybe that year and a half, and then I move on. My prices go up. I have a slightly different focus. So I don't really have any like set destination of, hey, I want to be the director of this company. But I think I just want to sort of get to a level where I'm I suppose recognized for my expertise outside of the smaller market that I'm in, or whatever I happen to be at the time. So I don't really have a final destination, if you like. It's just I just see it as a continuing process. So
awesome.
I suppose I'm relatively early because I'm only, about 30. There are people who've been doing it for a lot longer. To say I'm high on the ladder is I'm just at the early part of my career more than anything. So, I don't have a destination in mind, just onwards and upwards, I guess.
Great, because this podcast is about the journey, not so much already done that.
Yeah, exactly.
That you already done that. It's more like how you are planning to get there. Any goals for this year? So you said that you're doing like smaller steps So what's the step maybe for this year?
For this year, it's a lot of going to be on LinkedIn. I think that LinkedIn is going to be a major part of my puzzle this year, and I want to do produce a lot more content and explore ideas. I like to think and write and learn a lot of information, and that's sort of part of my own self-development. And I think it's just be interesting to share that process or that journey with people, because it not only helps them, but will also sort of, show off my own sort of expertise as well. So LinkedIn is definitely a tool that I've valued but underused. So that would be a focus for this year. And my portfolio, I think I mentioned this before, I'm particularly bad for with the onwards and upwards approach. I'm never satisfied with my work from a year ago. At the time I produce it, I'm always very happy. I'm always really proud of it. I'm like, this is the best work I've produced. And then a year later I go, this is trash. Not happy with this. It's not going in my portfolio. So my portfolio is always very light.
That's
so what
great.
I'd like to do is have
you're evolving.
It's like a mix. Yeah, exactly. There is like evolution to that, which is good. But also means that sometimes your work can be a bit on the lighter side. And I would like to do more. I have a few big brand concept projects in mind. Obviously, it'd be nice to add some of the larger pieces of work that I'm doing to that portfolio as well. But I suppose the realities of design are sometimes a bit more constrained than a concept project. Like a concept project, there is no limit to what you can add in because the client has no budget because there's no client. So you can do whatever you want. It's just a show-off piece. So portfolio pieces like that work really well on Behance and obviously show your range. So I've got a few concept projects in mind, and I'd like to add those this year as well. So yeah,
awesome, great.
They might two sort of personal development things for this year anyway.
Awesome. I want to go back to your title. How do you present yourself? How you personally end up with this one? What you have right now?
Yeah. Okay. So, I think when I started, so a little bit of my backstory, I guess, is I started in marketing, and I was involved in like audience development. It was mostly a statistics role, but I ended up taking on more design work and basically became like the in-house graphic designer. And after that, I went into comms, and I was sort of your general digital dog's body, I suppose. I did graphic design, but I did web, I did video, I did photography, I did whatever. And then when I freelanced, I started as a graphic designer. And as time went on, and I started interacting, my experience freelancing evolved. And I started interacting more with businesses, networking or whatever. I realized that the graphic designer is just there's such a broad catch-all term. It's worthless when you're introducing yourself to someone. So I would get asked, who do you work for as a graphic designer? I got asked, so you're a freelancer as a graphic designer. I got asked, oh, you're part of a printing company? Or what does that even mean? So all sorts of different questions. And also saying to a company, if a company says, oh, what is a graphic designer? And well, what is it? It's like so broad. How do you describe what a graphic designer does that has value? because if you say, hey, I'm a graphic designer, I can make a business card or a flyer, it's like, well, I have a printer that does that, so why do I need you? Well, I can build websites. Well, so you're a web designer then. So it's how you describe what you do, and the title you give has quite a big influence of someone's perception of you. And as time went on and I started to focus more on building logos and creating websites, they were the main two pieces of my work. So that's, you sort of end up saying, well, I'm a graphic designer, I do logos and I do websites. Okay, fine. That's the sort of, you explain your focus. But over time, it became apparent to me that a brand was the more, like, their brand was the most important part of their business, and the work I was doing was adding into that brand. So that there was a purpose behind the design work that I should be doing. And so as I started to have more of an interest in branding, because before it was just logos, and we just do a logo, but it's basically you're just making an icon. It's not a brand. There was a big difference. So as my focus became more on branding, I started to use the term branding specialist, which is, again, a very broad, generic catch-all term for anyone that sort of specializes in some way or focuses some way on branding. But it had more of an impact when meeting potential clients in networking. You go and say, oh, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a branding specialist. They lean forward. They say, oh, I've got a brand, and I don't really understand what brand is, but I've got one. So you obviously specialize in it. Maybe I can ask you questions or whatever. There's much more of an interest. You also move away from being someone that is paid to produce the work that is asked of them as a graphic designer, to being paid to provide insight and knowledge as more of a consultant. So the brand specialist was more of a consultant style role, and it attracted that type of interest, if you like, from business owners or whatever, that they valued your insight more because you portray yourself as more of a consultant or an expert. And then more of a time, I started getting understanding of strategy, and I was always particularly analytical as well, not just creative, but specifically analytical. And since design has a purpose, and the most important piece of the creative aspect of a company is their brand, then it would make sense that to define the strategy and the purpose for the brand before you make any design decisions is valuable. And that was a natural shift for me to go towards strategy and to understand strategy. And I'm obviously, as I said, still early in my career, so early in the strategic realm as well. But I also didn't want to just become a strategist. I didn't just want to go, oh, I'm brand strategist now, because for me, it's interconnected, at least at this point. Maybe 10 years down the line, I don't have the ability to design anything because I just have too much other work, and then strategy might be my focus or whatever. But I like the big picture. I like to be involved in the creative process. I like to collaborate with other designers, and because I've done so much broad array of design things when I was coming up as a freelancer, I can jump in and out of whatever part of the project I need to be involved in, and add my creativity to that. But I enjoy the strategic thinking side, the interaction, close interaction with clients, and understanding their business. So that's why I kept the designer part, but also added in the strategy. I wanted to say, if this is my focus, it's a bit more than just a generic specialist. I have some understanding of strategy, but it's also it's also at this point, there's it's the two sides of the coin. It's strategy and design. And if you want to work with me, that's the process you go through. You go through strategy, and then you go through the design phase.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the sort of evolution. It's a little bit of the be a bit more specific with your role as you're talking to someone. It sounds interesting, impressive, because you don't come across that many people who term themselves like that, especially in general networking.
So for me, I'm still when people ask what I'm doing, I'm a graphic designer. So my title is still a graphic designer, and I think it doesn't represent me anymore, but I use it just because it's easier. So hopefully after this call, I'm gonna
exactly. After this call, we should
title.
Think of something. I think that's sort of it's not actually easy. I know I said that this is how I've evolved my title, but it's certainly not easy for anyone to pick a title that represents them in the creative field. If they're a if they're a generalist, if they're a specialist and they're you're an illustrator or you're a typographer. Now, sometimes they do term themselves quite broadly. I've come across people that say, I'm a typographer and logo designer and this and that. And you think, okay, if you just said I'm a typographer, you do really, really stunning typography work. Just call yourself a typographer and that's it. You will get a lot more interest and you'll be much more successful that way. And the same with an illustrator. When you have so many things that you do and a part of, and maybe it's more common for people who are moving to more managerial sort of, they bring on other people or that other people work with them or for them, then maybe that pays to be more of a generalist at times. And so it's like an evolutionary process of you go from a graphic designer to managing other designers, because you do a lot of different things. So picking but I know you're big into video, but calling yourself a videographer probably wouldn't do you justice. So we have to brainstorm. I mean, what would you think? What would your if you were to give yourself a list of titles that could be applied to you, what would be your list?
So graphic designer. I'm doing videos. I'm also doing illustrations from time to time. I had the project right now with illustration, which I won't put in my title. I'm doing web designs, so it's a lot of things. Branding, and I'm also managing other people, I think, because I'm trying to have a different team every time I have a different project. So it's a lot of things to combine.
A lot of hats. So I suppose it's not that, what I should say is that my advice is not that you discard those things, those other titles. It's just the title that you wear in public. That's what I think of it. I think when you go to meet and I go to a networking event and I talk to someone and I say, look, this is what I am. I'm a strategist and designer, brand strategist and designer. And they're like, okay, that means I'm just do that. Like I specialize in strategy and then design. Whatever design is sort of broad and vague. It probably to them interprets as logo or general advice around branding. But I do websites. I'm a photographer. Things like that. I've got lots of little hats that I don't wear. They're just sort of on the side. But that doesn't stop me from doing that type of work for the client. It just means that it's not the work that. It's also the hat you want to wear to public is the one that you want to get the most work with. So if you call yourself an illustrator, you really want to be getting a lot of illustration work. If you don't like illustration work, then don't call yourself an illustrator, because it's not. You're gonna get work. You're gonna get work based on how you present yourself, the title that you use, and sort of, I suppose, the history of work that you've produced to a certain extent. I suppose that's just affirmation. It makes it easier. When you have work that backs up your title, but you don't necessarily need that.
I was thinking that I need to convey all those things in one sentence, but maybe I just need to pick what I want to work more with and just go with this one.
Exactly.
I also know that you went through a lot of titles. You worked different kind of industries. You have a degree in environmental science. You went through marketing and this graphic design, photography, filmmaking, and archaeology, and and a mechanic. So you had a lot of different jobs.
Had a lot of different jobs.
What was the most fun? Because some of them are really interesting to me.
I enjoyed marketing. It wasn't that it wasn't for me. There were parts of it that weren't for me. Like I've gone around, put up signs, like billboards. That fell under marketing, like the dog's body work in marketing, of handing out flyers in the street. That's not a fun job. But it's one of those. That's one of those jobs that you sort of just do. It's the design side was fun, but there's a lot of like strange, sort of small, busy work and a lot of analytical stuff. It's very much about, like, marketing is very much about numbers, volume of visitors, clicks, views, whatever. It's statistics and improving those statistics and like looking at pushing stuff on social media and producing content. And that's fine. But it wasn't exciting enough for me. The archaeology thing was actually quite fun. I only did it for a month or 2 months. So it's like a placement.
This one. Yeah. What were you doing in this one?
Well, I was like a teenager, and so I wasn't heavily involved in anything too exciting. But we did, like, I tagged along to a bunch of archaeological digs. So they did some digs in the local area where they were excavating. I don't know if it was Roman stuff or just older, like early, like 500, 600 years ago, sort of medieval stuff. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember. It's been a while since I thought about that. But there's like little things like you would have. You basically get a bucket of full of bits, like shards of pottery, and you just clean them up and try and assemble them and see how the pieces attach so they could be professionally done. So I basically lay out all these pieces and try and like a jigsaw puzzle, try and like piece them together. So that it was sort of fun, and the people there were relaxed, and they very enthused to have me involved in looking and showing what they were doing. There's also a lot of like digging trenches and manual labor. So, it had like a mix to it.
Yeah. Because in my mind, it's like dinosaur fossils and
Oh yeah, that would be great. That would be great. No, there's no dinosaur bones or anything like that.
yeah.
Mummies or anything like that. No, nothing too exciting. Just pottery and dirt. So yeah.
You also work as a mechanic.
Yeah.
You were working with like big expensive cars like Bentley and Bugatti and
Yeah. There was,
did you drive
so,
any of those?
No, I got to be driven in a one or two.
Okay.
Again, that's when I was very young, so I must have been 14, 15, 14 maybe. I can't remember how old I was exactly.
Okay.
But basically, I worked at there's a specialist restoration company for really old cars, for classic cars.
Mhm.
So they were Alvis cars. I don't know if you ever come across Alvis. They're really old,
No.
like
Mhm.
early 1900s sort of brand. They're not really around anymore. But their cars some of the cars are worth a lot of money. I think one of the cars they had there was 1.2 million or something worth.
Okay.
These are serious cars, and they had a few old-fashioned. I think they had a really old Aston Martin there and a really old Jaguar. So it was fun to be around those cars and see them done up. And it was a very specialist process, and they were obviously incredibly talented and really skilled. It wasn't just a normal shop. And I got to be involved, and they showed me basic stuff, but it was very much like cleaning up and preparing panels and bodywork and changing electrics and oils and all sorts of other bits and pieces. It was quite involved. It was a fun experience anyway, but not my calling. Not my calling.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to I want to ask you again about finding your title.
Yeah.
Actually, what's the importance of having a title? Like, does it really matters nowadays?
I suppose your title is arbitrary. It's literally just how you present yourself to someone else, and in a succinct way. So if you would have a conversation, say, "Oh, what do you do?" I think it helps to have a title that's more specific, or the ability to explain what you do in some sort of succinct way. Sometimes having a title helps that, sometimes it doesn't. Some people, that they work for a company, what they'll do is they'll tell you what the company does, not necessarily what they do. They'll just say, I am the senior manager of this company, and this is what this company does. So I suppose for a creative, maybe it's maybe what we do is more fun, and in that sense we need to explain a little bit more of what we do, because sometimes it's very broad. Maybe you can say, if you just say you're a graphic designer, it doesn't really mean anything. But also, if you're a freelancer, saying what you do and giving yourself a title also explains your business. Where if you're I am the CEO of this company or whatever, but sometimes they don't even need to say, or some people sometimes say, I work at Coke or whatever, Coca-Cola, and they're like, that what Coca-Cola is, so therefore you don't need to sort of explain, you don't feel the need to explain the business or the role that much. But I work in marketing at Coke, maybe that's the thing. But for someone who's independent, or I think more so, and in someone who's independent, the title matters a lot more. When you go into in agents in the industry and you work in house or in an agency, your title can be really generic, like junior designer, midweight, senior, tick tick tick. That's it. Like, it's so generic, it doesn't mean anything. Also, you get given quite a lot of broad range of work. Like, it's not it's not something you need to worry about. And also, when you're going to meet people, there's a difference in the aim of the conversation. If I'm meeting you at a networking, I'm saying, oh, I'm a senior graphic designer at this agency. You go, oh, okay, hi, that's nice to meet you. I'm a senior graphic designer at this agency. Oh, okay, great. You got any work on at the moment? Yeah, okay, great. And that's it. Nothing exciting. So just general conversation. If you're a CEO of a company and I want to work with your company, I'm not going to say, yeah, I'm a senior graphic designer of this, this agency. It's not going to have the same effect, because I want to tell this person that I'm someone interesting that they want to know, that they need to pay attention to, that does work that will benefit their business. So the title and how you present yourself and how you communicate, just like branding, it's important how you the perception that you provide someone.
Yeah, people perceive you completely different.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the crossover with the whole personal branding thing. You see a lot of it's basically that. It's basically ideas of presenting yourself in the right way, just like a brand. How you present yourself when you build a brand. You present your company to a client or customer. You present yourself to a potential client as an individual. I hate the term personal branding, but yeah, whatever. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it before, but it also helps you involve, like, you will get completely different clients if you're just a graphic designer than being a brand strategist. So
yeah, I
your
think
business
it also
is changing.
Yeah.
Involved.
Yeah, it influences the type of work that you get, but it also influences, how much you can charge. As simple as that. I suppose it's positioning yourself in the industry at different price points, at different expertise, different levels, whatever you want to call it. If you're a logo designer, I suppose it's like, you can think of it as like if you build a logo, build a brand, you go graphic designer, maybe logo designer, then branding expert or whatever you want to call it. Maybe then creative director of X agency or whatever. So it can go up and obviously creative director is a bit of a funny name. We can get onto that later if you want, but like it doesn't really mean anything. But it's unless you're attached to a certain agency. So I wouldn't use the creative director to describe yourself if you're an independent designer. But
yeah, for sure.
I would certainly think about what your price point is and what are people looking for in that price point? What do you do that you want to do more of? And then what's the right word or title to give yourself that describes what you do at that price point? It starts getting more complicated, but it's if you're not just a graphic designer, you're a web developer or web specialist or whatever, front-end web designer.
What you shouldn't call yourself, what not to call yourself,
don't call yourself a creative
what's to
director.
avoid.
Yes, creative director. I think creative director is probably the most overused outside of a graphic designer. I think creative director is overused for the opposite problem. Like I get it as well. I came across when I started out in the industry, I was definitely what do I call myself? I have no idea what do I call myself, because I didn't really understand the design industry that much. I literally jumped in from marketing, and I was mostly freelancing as a photographer in the early days. So I didn't really know what to call myself, and I came across a really good article. I've always remembered the article. It was basically called something like it was basically like what to title yourself, and it sort of said, tell people what you do. Don't give like a generic mean nothing title. You need to say what you are. So that's why I called myself a graphic designer, because I'm a graphic designer, so I'm just going to call myself a graphic designer. Obviously, over time, I realized that that's not quite helpful to be so broad, but keeping that in mind of giving yourself a title that reflects the work that you do. Brand strategist, brand designer makes sense. It's specific. It's very much the work that I do, but it's not a fluffy mean nothing title. Creative director is a very, very specific title. In agency, in-house, it's a very specific title. It means a very specific thing, but it's used by freelancers who they're independent, they own their own business, or they own their own work. They might consider themselves a business, so they call themselves a creative director, but it doesn't, like, the work of a creative director is very specific. Like, you might be a creative director if you have like a bunch of employees that work, you built your own agency, it's your own thing. You have people that work underneath you, you project manage everything, and you meet and organize, you basically run the show, and you organize constantly with the clients. If you're independent, even if you bring people in and project manage them, I'd still be hesitant to call myself a creative director.
Okay.
I don't personally use or think of using the title. I almost think of it like very much an in-house sort of role. Like an art director, like technically I can do art direction. Like if you project manage an entire, like, art direction is basically just managing the big picture vision of a project and having other people follow that vision and you manage them, if that makes sense. That's sort of the role. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, but as generalizing. So if you've done some sort of art direction, you can call yourself an art director. Same with the creative director. Are they really? They're sort of broad, mean nothing terms, especially if you're an independent. I think it makes more sense to give yourself a bit more of a specific specialist term and a focus on the work or the type of work that you want to do. So creative director doesn't actually doesn't say that you specialize in web design or branding or anything particular. It could be anything. And also, if someone says, "Oh, you're a creative director," I mean, the idea is that it portrays that you're the owner of a business. I think that's why it's used so much, is that it's my own business. Because as a graphic designer, you get asked who you work for quite a lot. So the other extreme is to call yourself the owner of a business, like founder, CEO of independent or creative director is all sorts of like overused terms for business owner. And it makes sense that you'd use that if you feel like it's your own business, you want to be proud of that. But conveying that to someone, it's better to have like a more specific title that you can explain what you do, rather than.
I will
like,
think exactly
broader.
the opposite. If someone presents themselves as a creative director, I will ask them in which company they work. Actually.
Oh,
so, yeah.
okay. That's.
But yeah, as the main tip, I'm keeping that you shouldn't call yourself something you're not, basically.
Yeah, it's calling something that you aspire to be, that you can do, that you do, but not that is dishonest in some way. Like try and be truthful to who you are and what you do. Maybe creative director also has like in the freelance pool, has a little bit of a strange reputation for. If someone sent me a CV and said they were a creative director, I would raise my eyebrows, unless they have like listed down a proper agency that I recognize. and it's the same with, like, I came across a guy who had a really, really long resume of like amazing list of like companies he's worked for. I was like, wow, look at that, amazing. But he only worked at them for like a month, and that was the minimum amount like on LinkedIn that you could like have on your LinkedIn. So it could be you could have worked there for a day or 2 days or whatever,
Okay.
or you basically freelanced in as a project, but you've been involved in. It's like adding clients. I suppose the same of what involvement do you have with the clients that you've got on your list, and you sort of and everyone makes their own judgment. Do we add in, I went on to this big project for whoever, and all I did was I did the editing of one of the photos for the CEO or whatever. I edited a photo for the guy, and I'm suddenly part of a big branding project. Is that client like you juggle whether you want to put that in your CV, yes or no? If it's a big brand and you get you a bit of attention, then you can do it, sure. As time goes on, you add to it. I suppose those ones should drop off as you've got ones to replace it. I suppose it depends on the stage of your career you're in, whether you add something that you have a lot of involvement with or less involvement with. This guy had a lot of very high profile clients and a few very high profile companies or agencies that he worked with, but the agencies were all like listed a month, so they were contract based, and probably freelance based, and the clients were probably with those agencies. And the involvement is vague. It's like, what did you do in that for those? So it'd been better if he'd listed, I'm a freelancer, these are the companies I work with, these are the projects I've worked on, this is what I did. Like that, to me, would be more representative of him and make me and probably give me a better opinion, if that makes sense, than the question mark. If I have a question mark, I'm less. It's more of it's a negative. If there's a question mark, it's a negative. It's not a positive. So transparency is good, and I think that with a creative director title, it always leaves a question mark unless you're attached to a certain agency. So when you say, hey, I'm a creative director, I have more questions. But if you tell me that you do something, I'm an illustrator or whatever, I have less questions. I have more enthusiasm, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm just too harsh on people who creative directors. but yeah, I get triggered by this term, unnecessarily. But no, I think creative director is a perfectly good title, but it means a very specific thing, and when it's used broadly, I have more questions than anything.
Anything else that you shouldn't do? Not as a specific title, maybe more like a tip. Like when I'm trying to find the title for myself, what should I do or not do?
I'd definitely repeat the bit of focus on the work that you want to do more of. That would be the main thing. Like, I enjoy doing web design. I don't adore doing web design. I'd much rather do strategy and building around brands and branding. So I don't use web designer to describe myself to anyone.
Yeah.
But if someone asks for a website, I can help them with the website. That's no problem. Yeah. But
so you don't use your main title as what you're doing right now, but what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, you can angle your title to do the work that you want to do. So even if you haven't done a lot of it for clients, even if you say, hey, I want to suddenly become whatever, maybe you want to become a brand strategist, and you've never done anything with strategy, or you don't know anything about strategy, I'd start with finding and learning as much about the area of specialism as possible, finding experts that you can listen to and understand what they're saying, and start trying to, like, you can give away the first few strategy sessions for free, try and get experience. Strategy sessions, I think, if you've had any consultation or done any consultancy with businesses around advice for their brand in any way, shape, or form, then strategy is an evolution. You've sort of already done a lot of it. Like, there's an element of strategy which is the core strategy is just sitting down with someone and discussing their brand. You can run strategy in a very like ordered way that you get results from it, that you can get who you can understand who their users are, their sort of attributes they attribute to their brand or whatever, and you can go into like detail. That's the crux of strategy. But at the very heart of it, it's a simple conversation between you and the owner or the people who are involved at the top of the business. So if you've run some sort of consultation, it's just a sort of step up from that. So if you want to do strategy and you've done consultation or you've not done any branding consultation, like, try and do that. Try and do more, getting more experience in that alongside. And once you've got a little bit, even if you've not really charged for it, you've got experience to say, this is what I do, and call yourself that, and go after that title. I would say give yourself a little bit of experience before you title yourself, because you might not like it. And it's better to do it for low risk than to like put yourself out there as something and have that pressure of first time and then for a proper paying client. But you're welcome to do that if you're ballsy. Yeah. But yeah.
Do you have any step by step how to find your title? Pick. Like maybe an exercise that someone that is watching this or listening to this like can do by himself?
You can make a list of all the things that you do. So I can build websites, and I can do photography. I can shoot video, and then you list them all down. All the things that you can possibly do. If someone asks and gives you money on the table, says, "Can you shoot a video for us?" Yes, I can shoot a video for you. And then you can put it in the category of, am I really good at that? Maybe not. Am I okay at it? Am I really good at it? And then you can separate them into columns of, I enjoy it, I don't really enjoy it. So if you're not really good and you don't enjoy it, then let's just get rid of it. You can put an X through that. And I would probably even say that unless you're getting money from it, it's like spreading yourself too thin. The more jobs you've got in your list, the thinner you get spread between those jobs, especially if you try and advertise them all. That's something else I've learned over time. I started off with a full list of, here's all of the things I can do, and these are the prices for them, the set prices, and then that got removed. I didn't have any set prices, but I led the list still. I was like, I'm going to everything's bespoke, so I'll try and quote it based on what you need, and that didn't work out well either. And the more I cut out them, the cleaner everything became. And if someone comes to me and says, "Hez, I want a rebrand, and we want posters and business cards and other things with it, like small add-ons," then I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You can just add them in to the full project cost. They're like tiny on the side. Don't need to worry about them too much. I don't need to have them itemized. I don't need to even know what they sort of cost. I can just sort of put them into the full project. And cleaning up the number of things that you do to just the core of what you're really good at, what you really enjoy. And they might be random. You might have you might say high on website and video and illustration, and I suppose you can sort of work out from either a monetary point of view where you make the most money, and then say I'm a web developer, because website work gave me 80% of my income last year, or 60% of my income, or whatever. Or I want to do even more with video than I currently do now, so I'm going to push myself as a videographer. Or maybe you can separate the two, and you have like a professional videographer as a separate business, like, and then just say I'm a web developer, so you have two businesses. It sort of depends on you and your situation. You can technically separate them out, or you can keep them in, or you can just pick one. So as an exercise, I would just list everything, get rid of the stuff that you don't enjoy doing, or because if someone says, I want to pay £50 for a business card, do business cards, you're like, having this conversation is a waste of my time. The conversation is worth more than what you're going to charge me. I'm going to charge you, so I'm not going to bother doing it. So you don't have those conversations anymore, because people don't come to you for business cards, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So if some things are low value, like, you can get rid of them and keep them in the back of your mind as like add-ons. They become add-ons. Okay, we got a big branding project and you need business cards for all of your staff. That's just an add-on. It's fine. Or we can even just include it because it's worth not that much, but it adds value to the project. So yeah, if you want to try helping with giving yourself a title, I would start with cutting down on the things that you provide.
Okay.
And go from there.
Sounds good. The list that you mentioned, like what you do, what you love doing, what you're making money maybe of, reminds me of Ikigai.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for those that don't know,
everyone's
what
obsessed.
This is,
everyone's obsessed with Ikigai.
Trending.
It's funny because I came across it quite a long time ago, and now everyone's. There's so much. I look at it's similar to like branding. Like the term branding is like a big exciting term. Everyone just uses branding, whether they're in the design industry or not. Like marketing or business coaches use the term branding all the time, and I've seen them use Ikigai quite a lot as well.
Yeah,
and that's sort of it's funny to me, but for
those that don't know what Ikigai is, if you want to explain,
go on. No, you can do it.
So I remember it's a Japanese word, two words actually, and basically it means it's the purpose of your life. What is the purpose of you? Wait, I cannot remember exactly.
It's sort of like what's your purpose in life? It's the thing you're passionate. Do something that you're passionate about. It's like work related. It brings you're successful and brings you money, and also benefits the world in some way. I think that's three.
You stated perfectly. So like combining all
it's
of
like it's like work, hobby, and philanthropy. It's the things that, and if you can combine all those three into one job, then that's your Ikigai. That's your purpose in life. I think
Should you use that to find your title? Should I use this?
Yeah, you might find that it's like you need a completely different job change, and suddenly you'll be working in something else, some completely different industry. You can use that if that helps. There's a lot of interesting videos on Ikigai.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, because you said that also branding it's quite trending, and I see a lot of people using that. Should you actually use brand in your title anymore, or is it like, should I be a brand something, or it's like so much overused that it doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know is the answer to that, to be honest. I think that like brand strategist is also becoming more and more popular, and I don't know whether that's because it's just like an evolution of the industry that we now start looking at strategy for businesses. I mean, like, it's been around forever if you think about it, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's also the accessibility of information that has now led people to be more interested in strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's very hard to do brand strategy. I will say though, because the price point that you need in order to do brand strategy, you sort of need to charge for it, and you're not going to provide brand strategy at a lower price point. It's just not possible. I mean, you could, but you're not going to make any money doing that. And also the businesses that are at that price point are just not going to need a lot of brand strategy. I think strategy is valuable for businesses and branding is valuable for businesses, but only to a certain point. And if they're a small business, then trying to tell them that, their branding and talking to their users and their customers and their potential audience and building a strategy for their brand, like financially, is not viable. I think it's at a certain point. So you may need to work with at least a certain size company to provide strategy efficiently,
Yeah.
and charge for it on its own merit.
What will be more viable for a small business instead of spend their budget on brand strategy?
Ideally, a small business will put money into their brand and their marketing. That's the sort of ideal scenario. The reality is that a small business needs exposure more. Like, it's a double-edged sword. For branding makes your business look attractive and sets the price point that you can position your business at. So you can charge more if you've got a better brand. That's the theory, at least. Or you can you can justify your price easily with a brand that matches the value that you position yourself at. For marketing, it's more about just sheer volume. Ideally, you'd probably say the process should be get a brand that at least does you some justice, that's not terrible, that's sort of like make do. Put money into your marketing to get exposure. Reinvest that money into your brand to develop it, and then continue with pushing marketing and getting more and more exposure. That would be the ideal cycle. Reality is that most businesses will spend as little money on their brand as possible, get a logo and website as cheap as possible, and then they'll put the money into marketing themselves, and that will provide them a return, and they'll just continue putting money into their marketing. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes that's it for business, and they become successful by reputation or by whatever, and their brand isn't that big of a factor. So strategy certainly doesn't come into it, but they will probably spend money on business coaches, and there's an element of business development and stuff like that strategy crosses over with, but it's not specifically brand strategy. So there are things that are specific to brand strategy that they won't touch on their business. So it's very difficult to say, but the value, so there's certainly far more value in for small businesses, at least a perception of value for small businesses with marketing, even though technically branding could give them more success. And I think there are certainly examples where branding is a necessity. So if a business has a product and they want to shift their business to a new price point, but their brand is exactly the same and then well known, it's like, how do you then justify charging the new price because people have set their perception. If you suddenly look much better and look like a more luxury product, then you can justify that price. You can even go over that price, right? So it's a completely, so branding will play a very important role in justifying your value, and it will either justify your value, or it will suppress your value and hold you back. So it also has like cycles into marketing. Like if you have a good brand, then it's like hit rate. If you've got a really bad brand, then you need more volume to get a high number of people that are interested in you. And if you've got an excellent brand, then you probably get more success with the same number of, you get more hits with the same volume, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, double-edged sword.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I also know that you're a lot into games, gaming.
Yeah.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite game. I have a lot. I really like the old classic games, like the original Deus Ex and the original Fallout, and maybe I don't really know why. Maybe it's nostalgia factor that I really like those old games.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just there's something like of a simplicity, or the honesty of them, that it was like maybe it was just like as an art form, very passion focused, rather than now it's more of it's a much more of a business. Like the games industry is definitely a juggernaut nowadays. And there's still loads of games that are like stunning pieces of art on their own merit. And there's a lot of new games that I really enjoy. But I think there's something special about some of the games that I played as a child, that I enjoyed, even though the graphics are terrible. I can still go back and play them now, and this, I don't know, there's something about it that it doesn't even feel like, it doesn't feel clunky or worse. It has this art style that it creates sprites.
I get that with Age of Empires 2, I think.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I liked Age of
For
Empires
me,
too.
because I was playing. It was the first game I was playing in my computer, so it's nostalgia for sure.
I preferred Age of Empires 1 personally. I don't know if I think it was the setting. I like the Greek setting.
I think I never played that one, so yeah, that's why.
Probably. Age of Empires 1 was my favorite. Okay. Like the original Diablo, the original Fallout, the original Deus Ex. I remember the original Need for Speed. Like that was. I thought that was great. There was loads of and also like really strange, quirky games that were sort of like very much in the 90s. That style that just, if they came out now, they wouldn't do well at all. But they were fun at the time, like arcadey. I have that nostalgia. I've been playing around games forever, so I have a nostalgia thing with it, and it's an engaging form of entertainment. But the quality that is just from a technological point of view and an acting point of view and a writing point of view, it's up there now. And it would give, it can have the writing, the quality of like an excellent book, like a saga, and it has the visual spectacle of a movie and some of the great acting moments of a really intimate or a well-written drama, TV drama, and you get sort of the best of everything with some of the modern games, and it has its own little quirks, and some things in the industry aren't that great, like any industry, but it's certainly an industry I have a lot of fondness for. And it's an industry where branding is a strange. It has its own little. There's lots of little things. It has its own little rules and how branding and how the corporate structure works is sort of different to a lot of other industries, I think.
Yeah, I know that you're seeing games in a completely different way. You have created a lot of designs lately for the PS5 controller. And
as a concept before anyone gets too excited.
But I'm seeing your Instagram and it looks like, at least for me, I'm not sure if you're doing that, but for me it's like kind of an experiment.
Yes.
You're seeing what's working and what not. And I don't know how you're going to use that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I'm going to use it either. Well, I decided I want to, the new controller of the PS5, I thought, well, I'd be interested to see how it would look. Just as simple as a different color, and someone created a mock-up, and I came across. I was like, oh, well, I'll just experiment and play around. And with Instagram, I don't really use Instagram that much, so I decided I've got all these assets. I'm just going to like chuck it up on my Instagram and post super regularly, schedule them to be posted super regularly, and just sort of see, in terms of posting times using similar hashtags, what the sort of data I can get from it as a curiosity, without any stress on whether it gets any likes or whatever. So
yeah, curious to see what will be the end result.
Yeah, because a lot of them are, because they're like, sometimes they're lots of variations of the same design, and there's not a lot of difference between them. So sometimes it could be 5 black controllers in a row, but they all have very different likes. Like some of them will get like next to none, and some will get loads. So it's so interesting.
So we are almost in the end. Where people can find you?
I suppose they can find me on Instagram. Aneirin Designs is I'm also available on my website.
I will have all the links.
UK. Yeah, it will be in
the description. What's the best way to reach you out? Is it Instagram?
Yeah, I'm available to be messaged on Instagram. I connect with people on LinkedIn as well. You might even find me on there, or my Behance as well. Basically all the stuff, as I say, interconnected, website, go wherever.
Yeah. Great. Another thing that I do with everyone in the end is ask them like 3 fast questions. You can answer fast. The first thing that pops in your mind, and then expand on that, or you can answer slow. It's up to you.
Okay.
It's fast questions. So yeah. The first one is which is your favorite book?
Okay, I'll do 2. I've been reading a lot of work-related books more recently. I did Martin Neumeier, who's obviously a brand strategist, well-known brand strategist. I read most of his books. I read 3 of them last year. I found Zag was a great book for anyone who's interested in brand strategy. I would recommend. I actually recommend Brand Flip more so than Zag, but Zag is definitely my favorite of his 3 books that I've read. So I'd recommend that. From a sort of like a fantasy, like a fiction point of view, I'm a big fan of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is it's the book that inspired Blade Runner.
Oh, okay.
So it's
then
actually,
I need to read it.
Yes, it's a really strange book. If you're a big fan of the film Blade Runner, I'm a big fan of Blade Runner. And the book is somewhat parallel to the film. There's a lot of the film. I mean, there's a lot of the book in the film, but it's not quite the same. They've taken a lot of artistic license with it, but it's it basically starts about the fact that this guy, Deckard, is the main character. He has an electric sheep, and to have a real animal at that point was almost like as a luxury, and it was almost like a status symbol to have a real animal, and he had a real sheep, and then that sheep died, so he didn't want to lose the status symbol, so he basically got an electric one, and 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 he keeps thinking about this electric sheep, and it's like a motif that goes through the book. It's very good.
Okay. I'm gonna have again all the links in the description for anyone that wants to check out the books. Great. Which is the person that that you admire the most?
I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. And I know he's a little bit of a meme or a big popular icon at the moment. He gets a lot more attention, but I like his sort of approach to, I suppose, his purpose, if you like, his ikigai, the sort of building humanity forward to the future, or whatever it is, in any number of different businesses that he's got. And he's also he seems very hands-on, like gets involved with the engineers and stuff at SpaceX. Obviously a complete genius, very interesting guy. And just for the sort of the things that he does separate from his personality, he's someone that and it's also the types of businesses that he has as the sort of type of businesses in that future focused building for something else, disrupting the industry or creating innovation, is certainly the types of companies that I'm drawn to and the types of areas that I'm interested in. So he's an obvious fit for me, I think.
Great. Love Elon Musk, so yeah. And the final one is one thing you wish you knew when you were starting your career.
When I started in design, I didn't really know anything at all. So, and it was very much a falling forward sort of development. I would learn as I was going, and definitely, I don't know. I also learn a lot by doing. So, knowing the information, sometimes, like you know that you should do certain things and have certain things in place, like contracts and all these other things, but you don't really know until someone screws you over and you go, oh, I wish I had this in place, or I wish I did this differently. So you learn by your experiences, and you can one thing I would have done, or I would say to someone who's starting out, obviously it depends on how you've come into the industry, and depends on your background. If you come from a design school, you graduate, you've got a portfolio, that portfolio is super important. It gives you that leg up in the early part of your career. But you might find that you might not get a job as a junior. You might struggle to get the junior designer position. Well, partly because the industry requires a lot to get a junior position nowadays. And I would have tried to get as much ambitious work, even if you provide it for free or whatever, to get yourself experience and put yourself in positions that allow you to try to push your expertise, like develop your expertise, build your portfolio. I think having that in the early part of your career is very important. But looking back, I would have said I would have liked to have done more work, more larger projects for free. I provided stuff for free and worked alongside. and then as I started charging for things. So it's sort of built from I provide work for free, and then I started charging. Really, I could have done with finding people to be involved with, even like concept projects. Networking and finding people to get to know is important. Building relationships, building connections early on, because over time you find that I've gradually built more connections as I've gone on, and charged more as I've gone on. If I made an effort to make those connections early on, it would have the ripple effect would have paid off sooner, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And having worked on more larger projects, even if they were free, to get that experience of, oh, this is what a proper branding project looks like. Not, so this is what I did for the logo, and then I'm doing something a bit more, then a bit more, then a bit more, and then I'm adding, and suddenly that service is mutating naturally. Having the experience of jumping and saying, okay, this is sort of where I need to be, gives you a bit more clarity. So putting yourself in positions to do work that gives you either work for a client that you're doing to get experience, or concept work, linking in with other creatives, building a network of people that you know, but also businesses, and getting involved in networking in general, I think is important, especially if you're a freelancer, but just in general, because you get to meet people from different types of industries, and you have that, you can build your confidence in a client sort of facing position that a lot of people probably don't. Like, as I think as creatives, most creatives are sort of slightly introverted, so they don't really like the big social. They don't like the stage that much. They're much more relaxed, just doing their own thing. Putting yourself in that position is not. It's actually not that scary. You get used to it quite quickly, but it's good to meet all these people and learn what they do. Put yourself, and building relationships with people is obviously important for not only having the business opportunities, but just in general, for the opportunities they provide further down the line. So all sorts. There's loads of little stuff, but I think that just generally, you can fast track your development by putting yourself in positions that deal with clients or potential clients in a personal way, and building more ambitious projects, even if they have stuff you work on the side early on. Both of those are good. I think good tips.
Awesome, man. Great.
What would your answer be to number 3?
Probably, yeah. To start earlier, doing things way earlier that I'm doing, and being a little bit ahead of what I'm now.
Yeah.
Basically having the experience that I got through the years, like a little bit earlier. That's it.
Yeah. It's one of those. It's one of those sort of catch-22. I feel like in our industry, you almost need to. It's almost like a set path. For a freelancer, if you get lucky enough to go into an agency as a junior, and then you settle and you become a midweight or whatever, and you just ascend the ranks when you're in-house, once you've got into an agency position and you stay there, you can sort of observe the process, if you like, of how the standards should be and all this other stuff, and it basically can fast track you. But the downside of that is that you have no direct, or depend on the agency, but very limited direct connection with the company and the client that you're working with. That's that might not always be the case, but as a freelancer, you have no choice. It's you, and you're going to talk to whatever company or person that you're working with. So you get very different experiences being in an agency position and being in a freelance position. And I think if you don't have other people, other designers that you can ask questions of and say, okay, well, how do you do branding? What am I missing? What can I develop? And what can I add to my service? If you don't have that, then it's very much trial and error and evolving over time. And that's also fine. That's certainly been more my experience. If you come from an agency, then you might have understood the principles of what you want to be producing. It's sort of just then trying to work out how you're going to do that and whether you're going to be able to do that at your price point or experience level or whatever. So it's I suppose everyone's different, but I think a lot of freelancers experience the same sort of issues and they will have memories of a time where they quoted way too low, or they had to pitch and compete with people, or they did work for free and then they got ripped off, or they did work that was like, I should charge so much more money for this project. There's like, we all have those moments, and I think they are sort of just part of the process, that you sort of almost have to go through those moments to build the experience, and not just to know that you should have like contracts and stuff in place, but to understand why, because you have the experience that, oh, I don't want to have this again. I don't want to go through this again. So it's sort of just like that.
That's great, man. I think this is great to close this podcast on with this tip.
Sounds good.
Thank you for being my guest. And
so thank you for having me.
Yeah.
we talk all the time anyway, so it's nice to finally sit down and do a proper full podcast, although sometimes I think that some of our conversations go on longer than a podcast, so
that's true. So that was the first trial to film it in a, I don't know, better quality maybe.
Normally we just have like Zoom calls, and that's it. But now we've got cameras and everything set up, so hopefully the quality, hopefully you've not got too much editing work.
We'll see.
Yeah.